break in and we'll have a chance to continue on that. On the specific issue of gender violence, of the use of rape as a tool of war, if I could, Father, I'd be interested in your views. How do we accomplish restorative justice? How do we accomplish accountability and the end of impunity for gender violence? This is a critical piece of this cycle through which all sorts of different rebel groups and the FARDC are engaged in violating human rights and in creating an environment of impunity and of abuse. How do we achieve justice and accountability for gender-based violence?
Thank you for this question. And again, I would like to praise Dr. Mukwege, who is doing a lot in this. 3 years ago, there was a meeting here on Global Congo Action. He spoke about what was going on about sexual violence. And as Bishop of Bukavu talked about peace, and myself, I gave a speech on the governance of natural resources. And I think one of the key points will be, as I have mentioned as a recommendation, to reform the judicial system. Mm-hmm. Because rape and sexual violence is really evolving in a culture of impunity. I don't know a single Congolese who has been condemned or jailed because he has raped.
And Father, how has the 2006 sexual violence law affected this? Has it had any impact at all, or the lack of enforcement, the lack of training and support and engagement by the police and the judicial system, is that the core problem?
Yes, I think this is the problem. We have to go to reinforce this, to train and to install even tribunals specialized in this field, as we are doing for the trade, for, I don't know, other field. And this is going on and it's really growing. As you mentioned earlier, you have more than 170 or 80 rapes every week. And so once the people who are raping, they feel free. They are not, let's say, troubled. They are not afraid of justice. So this will be going on for many years. But once justice is doing its job, and once we see, because that's a matter of education also. When people in Congo, in communities, we start seeing people who have been jailed, that will be already a way of educating. And also naming. When you are naming someone, when you put him on the front, and this is really someone who is raping, someone who is condemned by the community, I think it will start helping even those who are raping the women and the girls. So I think there is a lot to be done, but it's still a long way.
If I might, Mr. Dizolele, Mr. Borello, what role does achieving justice in gender-based violence have in achieving accountability and some sort of demobilization process for all the different rebel groups from M23, FDLR, others throughout the broader region? How critical is achieving this kind of justice? Mr. Dizolele.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, Eastern Congo, one of the programs that Eastern Congo is involved, Eastern Congo Initiative is involved with is called Access to Justice. And what Eastern Congo does is run clinic to give women access to just that, justice. This will be the core, if you will, the tipping point to end sexual violence. That will be justice. Because the day we go after the bad guys, either through setting up tribunals, special tribunals for this, where it's mixed court and others, by punishing the chains of command of these various militia groups, including the FRDC, then we'll see that change. Until that happens, in fact, the DRC is in dire need of truth and reconciliation and justice. These are two things that rarely come up in discussions like this. But those are key, along with the political process, in order for us to see a turning point in the development of DRC. Thank you.
So to your point, security sector reform can't just be the reintegration of those who've been bad actors who need to be held accountable. Mr. Borello?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The accountability question is really close to my heart and to my work. I worked for 10 years specifically on accountability in the DRC with the UN and with an NGO. So It's something I feel very strongly about. First of all, on the rebel groups, we have what is known as the revolving door for rebel groups, continuing integration, and the criminals get always the best positions, and that's what the N23 is about. If we look at the number of officers formerly of CNDP, many of them have not defected, have stayed loyal. Who has defected? Those with the worst human rights record, those with the criminal smuggling networks that need to protect their network. So I agree with all my colleagues that we have to deal with N23 as like with any other rebel group, with accountability and a DDR program for combatants who have not committed abuses. On the broader accountability question, I have worked for many years with the Congolese judiciary, and there are a lot of people in the Congolese judiciary who are brave and competent and would like to hold people accountable. However, I've heard many times that that general is protected by this other general and we cannot go after him, but we can go after this guy. So the United Nations Human Rights Mapping Report has recommended in 2010 the creation of internationalized mixed chambers, which means chambers in the judicial system of Congo composed by Congolese and international judges, Congolese and international prosecutors, and Congolese and international investigators that would work together, thus building capacities and adding resources to the Congolese judiciary. As you know, the criticism to the Rwanda and Yugoslavia tribunal where they were sitting outside, but at the same time giving the judges and the prosecutors that political coverage to go after everyone. Ambassador Rapp has been leading this effort in the international community. Now is the time. There is a law in the Congolese parliament that was almost adopted in 2011. It's a time to push for that and to push President Kabila through also our special envoy to do just that. And if you allow me just one more minute, I would like to thank you and Senator Durbin for the National Defense Authorization Act and the provisions on accountability. And our own special envoy could identify the names of the people who then should be included in this list for sanctions. Thank you.
Thank you. I hear a continuing theme that appointing a capable high-level special envoy, empowering them to continue to engage broadly in a regional, meaningful peace process, but insisting on accountability for gender violence, for war crimes, and investing in a strategic minerals system that is conflict-free could all in combination really open up a positive future. Senator Flake.
Mr. Prendergast, what leverage do we have, or does anybody have with Rwanda to get them to cooperate here? What in their national security interest can they identify to cooperate?
Well, I think the United States has a pretty special relationship, or has had a pretty special relationship with Rwanda post-94. I think that President Clinton, in the aftermath of the genocide, worked very hard. President Bush continued that. The relationship not only was national, but head of state to head of state. The Obama administration has tried to do that as well. I think the last chapter of the saga of cross-border support from Rwanda to armed groups inside Congo in the form of this M23 chapter was just overreach, was a bridge too far, was a slap in the face of everyone. Having worked so hard for peace in Congo, the United States investing almost $1 billion a year of humanitarian, peacekeeping, all other kinds of assistance into Congo, to have that all jeopardized and undermined, and all kinds of intelligence leading to that, it was just too much. And I think it has affected the relationship quite substantially in the short run between Rwanda and the U.S. The leverage, however, is retained in a number of things. First, there are tremendous relationships built up over the years between people in the Rwandan government and people in the United States government. That should not be discounted. Anyone who's worked in government understands those relationships can have a major influence over policy. Secondly, though, I think the stand that the United States took, even though it was a small one and somewhat symbolic one of suspension of certain forms of assistance, and then working within the World Bank to suspend budget support to Rwanda, I think made a very strong statement that business as usual, which had been allowed for a long time for many reasons, well, we're trying to counter the FDLR and all these other reasons, was no longer acceptable. And so I think that maintaining that principle and standing for principle on the part of the United States, that there cannot be interference across borders in the affairs of neighbors in the Great Lakes. The volatility is just too high as a precondition for normalized relations, I think is the key point of leverage, and it doesn't always have to be a public one. It can be a very important private one, as evinced by President Obama's discussions on the phone with President Kagame.
Right. Mr. Dizolele, do you see that desire to have a good relationship with the U.S. and the aid that follows and is connected with that, does that outweigh their desire to have a more friendly government on its borders? Or is the incentive there? Is it in their national security interest to cooperate? Aside from relationships or incentives, like I said, in terms of aid and whatever else?
Senator, you mean for Rwanda?
Yes, from Rwanda. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, it's hard to answer that because only Rwandans can really answer that. Mm-hmm. But if we can look at the history, it's been complicated because the Rwandans are not forthcoming with the reasons of their involvement in the DRC. They've used the premise of going after the militias. If that was the case, then when you consider the lengthy involvement of Rwanda in DRC, which started in 1996, this issue should have been resolved a long time ago. So it would have been great if Rwanda will come, be much more bolder, and say exactly what in DRC. Is it because of minerals? Do they want, Germany and France started their cooperation after World War II over economics. It was about coal mining. So there's actually opportunity for Rwanda to build a great partnership with DRC that is not based on a Spartan military approach. So we should encourage that, and I think we've heard that theme today as well. Encourage Rwanda in becoming more forthcoming and not playing this game of we are part of the solution. Yes, you can be part of the solution, but for the last 20 years, they've not really been part of the solution. So we need to push them on that economic front as well, have a transparent way of looking at the issues, the economic interests. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Borello, quickly on that.
Yeah, very quickly. Yes, regional economic integration, I think, is the answer. And one idea would be to encourage the World Bank to set up a Great Lakes Fund that would look at cross-border projects, road building, mining, hydroelectric, that would create that interdependence that is based on legitimate trade and legitimate economic interests that would then create a strong disincentive from continuing to support armed groups because that would disrupt those economic activities.
Right. Father, you mentioned that electoral reform is needed in the Congo. What incentive there does Kabila have to move ahead? Obviously, that might affect his ability to perform in the next election. So what are our limits there in terms of encouraging electoral reform? How receptive will the government be?
I think there's a necessity of to call this electoral reform because it's needed, and we are waiting for it since we had only presidential and legislative elections, and we have not yet have the provincial and the local elections. And if we go back to the history, even in 2006 election, we had only presidential and provincial election. So presidential, legislative, and provincial election. So up to now, we have not yet get or have local elections. Mm-hmm. That means the grassroots democracy, local, I would say, governance in terms of democracy have not yet been really rooted or grounded into the local population. So the push would be to say, okay, there is the urgency of doing that. And as I was saying in my statement, the first thing to do is to push quickly this reform of the Electoral Commission. We know what happened with the November 2011 elections. And we know that there should be a reform of the Electoral Commission, the CENI, and also the composition of the member of the CENI. We can't have an independent Electoral Commission with 4 members of the majority political parties and 3 from the opposition party. It can't be independent. And this is why there is a move and a push from the civil society to have more civil society people in the Electoral Commission. And I think that could bring, I would say, that it will be less politicized Electoral Commission, and it could go forward. So I think that the law, the electoral reform law, has been passed by the parliament. It is now on the table of President Kabila, and it went to the Court of Supreme Justice, so it's in conformity of the Constitution, and it's waiting for the promulgation from by the President. And what the Catholic bishop said or suggested to the President is to have more civil society people in the actual composition of the Electoral Commission. And I think that will help.
I hope we can do that. And typically those who win elections don't believe there's any need for electoral reform. It's those who lose who do. So it's a difficult subject, I know. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.